We're here on day one of Identity Week America 2024. I'm joined now by Brian Lewis, who's CEO of Intellicheck. We spoke earlier this month, catching up on their business. It's really great to speak to you again.
You too.
And ask you new questions, really. Yep. Tell us about the major trends in fraud and fraud prevention, and what the biggest sectors are really doing to counter these threats.
Look, I think there's a number of things that people are looking at. One is, I think everybody's realizing that up to a third of your customers will leave if they become the victims of fraud or identity theft. So I think people are taking it a little bit more seriously than they used to. The other thing I'd say is that they're realizing that the old school ways of doing things don't work, right? And I'm kind of almost an example of that. I had to log into one of our corporate bank accounts the other day, and they said, they were pulling from one of the credit agencies some of that knowledge-based stuff. And they basically said, which phone number is associated with you? Simple enough to find my wife's phone number. Which address did you live at? That's all things that you can Google and find out. So they're realizing they need to do better authentication, but at the same time, don't make the customer feel like a crook, because that turns people off. So I think they're all beginning to say, how do I bring on more good customers in a very simple manner without making them jump through hoops? And that's how we help them.
And how are you, helping customers prevent fraud? What things can they do as customers to protect themselves?
Yeah, so we end up starting off the process, which I think also impacts, how do I get more customers at the same time stopping fraud? Everybody talks about synthetic identity theft. Everybody talks about identity theft. And at least here in the Americas, if you want to open an account, you want to change your account, they generally ask you for two things: driver's license and social security number. Now, we just saw that giant hack of social security numbers. They're out there and they're cheap. And then the driver's licenses, I could show you fakes that you can't tell, and they're only $40. So basically, for about $60, I can now become you. Now, what we do is we can tell with such certainty that 28 state-level law enforcement agencies use us to validate IDs. We validate the ID, we make it simple for the customer because we also pre-populate everything. They don't have to type or do a thing. And that's one of the reasons that we speed the process and stop the fraud.
We've talked about trends of driver licenses at this conference, seeing the adoption. What do states, need to consider when they're trying to comply with these real ID regulations as well? Yep.
So what I will tell you is within 30 days of a state coming out with a real ID, you can buy it online. Because technically, the hassle of a real ID is me proving that it's me when I go to get a new one, and I get the star in the corner that says, I can now travel with this thing. But again, it's just plastic, and the bad guys can copy the plastic very, very quickly with all the holograms and everything in it. So while the real ID, it sounded good, I think there's more in the plastic that would allow you to see if it's fake or not, but the bad guys copy it almost immediately.
What do organisations have to do? They've got a part in this as well, to prevent fraud whilst maintaining the seamless customer experience.
I think a trend that we are seeing is education, right? Because they want to educate their customers about why they're doing this. Why am I putting you through this? And I think it's kind of funny because, you go check into a hotel, they ask for your ID, but it seems odd to ask for your ID when you're opening an account online or you're calling into a call center. We work with a lot of those call centers at banks, because if they look at something and say, hey, this looks like it might be the start of account takeover, they're going to ask you to authenticate yourself. And people just aren't used to that. But if you explain to them, this is for your protection, people will do a lot more than they, I think, have been in the past without abandoning, the process.
It's great to speak to you again today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks. So far, it's been great.